Like, it's
I
kind of
think
hard for me to. Oh, go on.
yeah, I think these guys coming out of Idlib are very savvy.
Yeah.
At least they're trying to be, and they're trying to. They know the good thing they got going on right now, and they're trying to get as much as they can. So certainly when they came in, Iran needs to get out. Iran needs to be held for all its crimes in Syria, et cetera, et cetera. So they had that line. But if what you're saying is true about no, we can be friends with the Iranians. Is that being said because their foreign minister, the new Syrian foreign minister, is in Qatar, is in Saudi Arabia, right? Is it being said because Annalisa Baerbock is showing up from Germany, and we've got to put some type of fear in them, try and have some leverage, try and give them some reason to
Maybe.
think that we won't roll over for them. Is that potentially it? Or do they really think that way? I can't imagine they think that way, both for ideological reasons as well as just for the reality of the war of the last 14 years or whatever. But yeah, maybe.
Well,
maybe.
Matt, let me add something. The sanctions are still on Syria, technically, right? Like all these.
They just removed them, or they
Oh, they
removed
just
some of
removed
them.
them.
Particularly,
Okay.
in particular, they removed the energy sector sanctions.
Okay.
Anything that can be, as well as other sanctions that would have some type of humanitarian effect. The sanctions against the old government are still there, but also too the sanctions, interestingly, against HTS are still there. And the Treasury Department said they will look at that 6 months from now and then decide how they're going to handle that. But as of yesterday or whenever it was, they did remove many of the sanctions on Syria, particularly those regarding the energy sector, which is really important for the Syrian people, regardless of what you think about the whole thing. The reality is the Syrian people have been suffering so terribly for the last 14 years.
hmm
And so they do need that type of sanction relief,
They need a bone,
which is
for
something
sure.
that many of us have been arguing for, since they put these sanctions in place, particularly in 17 or so when they really put these draconian sanctions in place.
Well, there's got to be some payoff, if they're going to accept this regime change. Like, wasn't that the promise to begin with that, if you remove Assad, your quality of life is going to go up?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
what?
And the sanctions were integral. I think a
Yeah.
lot of us were surprised at how quickly the Assad government collapsed, right? And then I think a lot of us too, after a week or two or three, we put some thought into it, kind of thought about it. We kind of added it all up. It was like, I don't know how that guy was surviving,
Yeah.
and this, right? I mean, like
Yeah, I don't
basically
know how
a
he stayed
feather
in
would
that
knock the
long.
government over,
Jesus.
and that's what happened. I mean, essentially, they were knocked over with a feather. I mean, there were people killed and things like
Yeah.
that, but it wasn't. To look at what occurred in a span of 2.5 weeks. I was in Ireland actually when Damascus fell,
Mhm.
and I went to bed, and HTS was outside of Homs, and I woke up in the morning, 8 hours later, and Assad was on a plane to Moscow.
Yeah.
How quickly it happened.
Well, Assad quiet quit like a couple years ago, I feel like, and then it was definitely evident that he did because as soon as he went back to Moscow, he was like, "Nah, I'm good. I'm gonna start a ophthalmology practice. I'm just gonna live my life." And juicy follow up detail: apparently, his wife is now filing for a divorce for him, and she's gonna go back to Britain.
Really?
She's a dual
I heard
national.
I heard that was a bunch of bullshit.
Well, I'd like to believe it because
His
it's
wife
more
is
like a
very
reality
sick.
TV show that way.
And-
But like, imagine like the Keeping Up with the Assad's reality TV show. Like the premise is, this former dictator has to escape to Moscow and he has to start an ophthalmology clinic.
Be- well, it work out really well, right? Because
Yeah.
all during this time, he's bought property in Russia.
Mhm.
He's shipped gold over there,
Right.
And then he falls victim to like Russia's divorce laws, and she takes everything from him.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
His kids are there too. I think his kids go to school there. His wife has like aggressive leukemia.
Yeah, I saw something about that too.
So
yeah.
So I don't know. I don't really care that much about the personal details of his life. I guess the main thing I'm interested in is like what's gonna happen, because one of the reasons that the Assad government fell so quickly is because I think the average soldier was making something like, man, I forget this number. It was something like $10 a week or something like that, or even less. Like they weren't able to pay the army, and these HTS guys, like, what are they getting? Like $1,000 a month, more than that.
Yeah,
I mean, you would know better than I would, but like how much
I don't
that,
know.
a jihadi merc goes for.
Right, and certainly they've had the backing of Turkey for all these years, so they lived pretty well in Idlib. I mean, I think a lot of us weren't sure what was happening in this enclave they've had there, like what's going on, and obviously now we knew that they were re-equipping, they were getting better, they were getting training, they were organized, they were running the city, and they had resources.
They were incredibly organized. So I said this in the last episode, and I was super surprised when I heard about HTS way back when, when the Syrian civil war had kicked off, when they started being relevant, and then I just forgot about them. And then I'm like, oh, who are these HTS guys again? And I start reading into it, and I'm like, they ran an economy. They did trade. They traded with Turkey. Like they were making their own weapons. Like they were manufacturing things. And evidently, like relatively speaking, I'm not trying to like give them too much props, but relatively speaking, they ran a tight ship in Idlib and were very competent. And I was like, okay, well that makes the whole situation of them taking over the Syrian government a little bit more interesting, because clearly they figured something out, smaller scale, but still, like this isn't like some random ragtag group of people who have no idea what they're doing. Yes, you have to give them the fact that Turkey was supporting them, for sure. I'll give you that. But it's like you pointed out a lot of, in the top of the show, you could give people money and they could waste it frivolously, right? So,
absolutely.
You have to have a level of competence on top of some foreign backing in order to get shit done. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and we'll see what they do. I mean, many of the people that were running their government, their Salvation government, as they called it, in Idlib, are now in those positions, the same positions, but on a national level in Damascus. And that's what you would expect. Why would anyone do anything differently?
Right.
And we'll see what they do over the next year or two. I know they said that elections won't be for 4 years out, and they've already started changing the school curriculum. And I don't know if you guys saw when Annalisa Baerbock, the German foreign minister, was there over the weekend. Some Syrian press release, they had her face and hair obscured, right? So I mean, you're gonna. I mean, so we'll see what they do. Will they be like the Afghan Taliban? And just be ruinous to their population in pursuit of the Islamic government that they want? Or are they going to be more transactional? Or do they realize that they are in a pretty precarious position, that they owe their place to the Turks, as well as to the benevolence of the Americans? And are they? But the idea, I think, there's a Daoud, who was the prime minister of Afghanistan in the 70s. He's the one who threw out his uncle or cousin. I can't remember which the king was, but Daoud takes over, and he's the prime minister in Afghanistan. And he said, "I light my American cigarettes with Soviet lighters," right? And how well did that work out for you in Afghanistan?
Yeah.
So that's something that the Syrians have to. This new Syrian government has to be very careful of. Is like, don't think you're so smart. Don't think that you have leverage where you might not, and that what you can bring in is something unpredictable or that you can't foresee. And they've been very, again, vague on what they're going to do. They've said the right things, but when it comes to the Kurds, you've seen them say both things, right? Where the Kurds cannot be autonomous, there will be no secondary or other type of citizenship in this country. The Kurds will be assimilated. To at the same time saying like, no, we're cool with the Kurds. We're looking forward to working with them. And maybe that's part of the deal for the Americans. I was saying before, the Kurds used to ship the oil, truck the oil to their cousins in Iraq, who would then put it in the pipeline, and the Turks would put it on a ship and bring it down to Israel. Maybe now they'll just ship that oil directly from eastern Syria. The Kurds get a cut, HTS gets a cut, and then the Israelis get discounted oil. A couple 100,000 barrels of discounted oil every day. Maybe that's one of the deals that's being made. I don't know, like just pure speculation, fantasy on my part, but something's being offered in all these meetings. I mean, every day there's a different delegation in Damascus. Every day this week, the Syrian foreign minister has been someplace else. I think he was in Jordan today. So these aren't just like, hey, how you doing meetings? Get to know each other, break the ice, play a fun game to know one another.